Now, I'd like to hand things over to Nicole, who is our speaker today.
Hi, everyone. We went through housekeeping and sponsors, so I guess we're going straight to me. I'm Nicole Greenberg. I am an attorney in Illinois. I also spent about 5 years running an IT staffing company based out of Chicago, but doing work nationwide. In conjunction with that, consulting and working legal for a managed service provider and vendor management software company. We do all of the contingent workforce for a number of companies, as well as a major large consulting company. In doing so, and as changes have come in the law along the way, have learned a lot about what is currently going on, what best practices are in contingent workforce and in the gig economy. So I'm currently working as a consultant, both external and internal, in HR technology, as mainly focused in contingent workforce. I'm on Twitter, it's NGSESQ, or you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, say hi. And I guess from there, I'll just kind of move on. What we're going to be talking about today, I suppose we should do the big legal disclaimer. So I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer, is basically what this says. So I need to make sure that everybody is aware that whatever I'm providing here is for information purposes only, and it's not creating any sort of attorney-client relationship. And when we talk about the Q&A at the end, I'll be able to answer your questions kind of generally speaking, but insofar as anything specific or any matter you might need to deal with urgently, don't rely on my advice. Make sure you get somebody qualified in your area to help you with that issue. So let's start off by talking about the gig economy in general. It's a big kind of buzzword these days in defining the gig economy and what is the gig economy. So this is actually from the American Action Forum. It's sort of a diagram of what's out there and what the gig economy is. So there's the gig economy in general, workers with alternative work arrangements. We talked about that for years, independent contractors, temps. When we talk about the online gig economy, you talk about all the sharing platforms, Uber, Lyft, versus they talk about the sharing economy where it's specifically defined as underutilized goods and assets. The reason why they say Uber or Lyft or something like that is because they'll define somebody using their personal car to make money as using an underutilized asset that otherwise that car would be sitting in the garage or on the street not being used. So it's kind of that crossover. But there's a lot of stuff out there as far as what is the gig economy? Is it new? Is it the new buzzword for something that was old? Are people that are job hopping or working between a number of different opportunities, not sticking around the same job? Is that the gig economy? Well, some say it is, some say it isn't. And it's only recently that the Department of Labor has actually started to look into this and see if they can put a measure on that. So there's this concept of the growing gig economy and this idea of, is that a myth or is it reality? So there was a recent study done making all of these measurements. It's done by Pew Research, where between 1990 and 2004, the number of people that are listing themselves as self-employed has actually gone down. And the number of incorporated people has gone up, number of unincorporated people has gone down. A lot of that actually has to do with legal and compliance issues that have arisen over the past number of years. It was very, very easy back in the 90s to just say, oh, somebody was going to be an independent contractor, and not really look at all of the different regulations that have popped up over the course of the years with the new Healthcare Act and changes in the National Labor Relations Board, what have you, that contribute to how companies are defining people and how the government then defines those people as far as what benefits need to be offered. But basically the bottom line is, in a lot of cases, we're looking at the same freelancers with new technology. So again, over the past few years, you've got all of these mobile apps that actually enable people to do the same jobs that they had previously been doing, but using a mobile platform to do it, which is why it's become the hot new buzzword and a thing that makes it look a lot bigger than it necessarily is within the economy. So say, for example, you have an app that you'll use to hire somebody to clean your home. Now you can go on your app and you just book the appointment, whereas previously you would have had to go into the yellow pages and find someone to call and call them up and book the appointment. And it makes it, again, it's the same sort of people, and it also becomes a question of how that technology is potentially redefining how those people are organized and the level of control they have over their work. So, like I mentioned, there's been a massive crackdown over the course of the past, say, 5 to 10 years on misclassification of employees, and whether people that are defined as independent contractors currently are independent contractors, or whether they should be employees. Out of that, there has arisen this massive move towards managed service providers, taking all of these previous staffing companies that used to be directly connected to hiring managers and organizing them into one central place inside procurement or potentially inside a section of HR. And making sure that there's a level of compliance that previously didn't need to be worried about. And the result of that is a lot of companies have started to require anybody that's working for them independently to be incorporated, or for them to be an employee of someone else, which is where you see this upturn in incorporation, a downturn in unincorporation, and downturn in general of whether people would consider themselves self-employed. For example, there's a lot of people that are working as recruiters and that used to be able to come on and work as an independent contractor for a company. So, you know, recruiting is one of those industries where people don't necessarily stick around very long. They tend to do a lot of job hopping. And whereas before they could go in and work as an independent contractor for an organization, best practices now in most organizations are to bring those people on through some sort of third party, whether it be an exclusive staffing provider or a provider that does deal exclusively in providing recruiters, and make them an employee of that organization and then bring them on through there. So the question then becomes, are these people still self-employed or considered part of the gig economy when they're just working as a temporary employee or generally as an employee of one of these staffing firms or service providers? And as far as the government's concerned, they're not considered self-employed anymore. They're definitely not self-employed, but they're not considered necessarily part of the gig economy or part of the contingent workforce. Whereas in reality, they're really being put into what's now being, there's a lot of attention being called to this concept of joint employers. And we'll get into that a little bit further in a bit. So basically the question is it growing? And there's a lot of people out there that say that the gig economy isn't growing and can't possibly be growing because it's being sued to death. So there was a lot of press recently about recent lawsuits in California for Uber and Lyft drivers, where these workers that you would think have complete independence over what they're doing were actually classified by the state of California as employees of Uber. And actually, one of the reasons why the other lawsuit with Lyft drivers failed had to do with the language in their arbitration clause and not to do with the actual arrangement. And because of that, there's now been a move towards changing the arbitration clause in Uber's arrangements such that they won't be able to come forward and sue to become employees the way that they were in California. Now, pretty much every other state has said that these people are independent contractors. However, California typically has much more stringent laws when it comes to employment, as anybody who is doing business and practicing in California knows, so much so that, as many of you know, there's a separate certification in HR for California because they do have much more strict laws in dealing with classification of employees, as well as many other things dealing with benefits and paid time off, what have you. There's also a lot of crackdowns that are based on the Affordable Care Act. They're already in motion, and the final phase is limiting exemptions to companies with less than 50 employees, which really knocks out a whole lot of people that could have previously been provided with, could have been employees at very little cost to the employer, that now because of the Affordable Care Act, they're forced to provide a certain percentage of their health care benefits as well, bringing the cost of employment up, providing even more motivation to want to bring people on as more gig workers, part-time, or independent contractors. The government knew that when they brought this act into place, and because of that, they're cracking down on companies that are trying to avoid paying for health care for their employees by looking at these companies and whether or not classification is happening. The final blow to all of this was recently the Department of Labor put forward a memo that completely revamped what being an independent contractor means. And that was another blow to the gig economy, because it used to be a matter completely of control. And now they're taking a number of these other factors that are out there and applying them equally to the control factor, such that even if you don't necessarily have control over your people, then they still could be employees where you would normally consider them contractors in the past. So basically what they're saying is that every worker is someone's employee, and they want to get rid of this concept of the independent contractor entirely to make sure that everybody has the same sort of benefits. And that's basically one of the concepts that a lot of people talk about when it comes to the gig economy, is that whether they're working for Postmates or Uber or Lyft or any of the other myriad of companies that are out there, ride sharing, delivery, or services for your home, or even services for your business that you can just, hire in somebody off of what used to be Odesk or Elance, and bring these people in and say, here, this is the job real quick I need done. That if you're controlling aspects of that person's work, they're going to call that person an employee, and they want to make sure that these people aren't going into jobs with the expectation of getting paid and not getting paid simply because they're an independent contractor as opposed to an employee when it comes to their status. There's also regulations that are in place, in particular, as I mentioned, when it comes to the Affordable Care Act, that mandate that the company for whom work is performed must ensure compliance for contingent workers as if they were direct employees. So again, the shift to making people employees of other organizations and bringing them onto gigs that way, whether it be through a typical arrangement like you'll see through an IT staffing company, for example, that brings on a number of people as their employees and then, farms them out to various different organizations that need their help for a short period of time. Those are technically gig workers. But what used to be able to happen is those smaller firms used to be able to provide those employees with a lot less benefit than they used to have than they would have had if they were employees of the larger organization. Whereas now, because the government is aware of those sorts of situations, they've built it into the new regulations that the parent company or the company that you're providing services to is going to be responsible for making sure that there's compliance and that there's somewhat of the same level of benefits offered to those employees as if they were working for that company itself instead of for that staffing company. So basically it goes into this concept of classification, and that's really what so much of the gig economy has become about, and whether organizations can handle this idea of having this lack of control and still provide the level of service that they want to provide while keeping up with all of the different regulations when it comes to controlling their employees, controlling the output of their work product, and maintaining the classification as contractors for tax purposes, for benefits, for everything else. A lot of these are older, but there's two recent changes in the past year or two that have really had an impact on the economy and whether people are going to be classified as independent contractors and be able to move around and have the freedom that you would expect from being a contractor. The first one was the National Labor Relations Board. They recently came out and said that in addition to the 10 things that you would look at in their typical test, The question becomes whether a worker is rendering services a part of an independent business. And that's what I talked about originally when it comes to this concept of expecting people to be incorporated or really defining themselves as an independent business, that you can't have somebody come forward anymore that really has, you know, a great example is some of these people that we used to be able to bring on. Previously, you would think of them as 1099 contractors. And one of the biggest risks that you'll see is at the end of the year, because they really have no experience ever working as an independent business, you'll end up as a business owner getting a letter from the IRS saying, oh, by the way, this person didn't pay the right taxes. We need all sorts of information on what the work they did for you, because they're filing as a 1099 all of a sudden, and they're used to working as a W-2 employee of another organization. And a big reason for this was really during the Great Recession, when so many people got laid off, people were coming up with whatever jobs they could possibly have. And people that had previously only done work as W-2 employees of an organization, now all of a sudden were working as independent contractors because that was out there, and there were gigs out there. And people didn't necessarily want to hire on full-time employees because they weren't really sure what was going on with the economy. So instead, they would bring people on for these shorter-term gigs. It happened in particular in IT, which we were dealing with quite a bit. Well, when you bring in these workers that have no experience working as an independent business previously, that's where you really start to see these things. Like, for example, you saw the Uber case is a great example of a situation in California where, you know, they're paying for all of these things, dealing with the upkeep and maintenance and tolls and all of the rest of their service. And because they're used to working as a W-2 employee, they don't understand the concept of needing to take care of all of those things yourself as an independent business. And that the rate that you might be being paid as a worker is really significantly lower when you take into account all of those business costs. And that's where you'll end up having issues with complaints about it and then regulations in the government. So the concept of what defines an independent business is significant entrepreneurial opportunity, the realistic ability to work for other companies, proprietary ownership or interest in the work being done, and control over important business decisions. So where this really comes up is things like hiring an assignment of jobs. If you have somebody that you say that they are the one that has to specifically perform the work and they can't hire anybody else on, they can't subcontract, for example. Or the concept of them being able to sell things out to other employees. This came out of this FedEx case in 2014, and this concept of whether FedEx delivery drivers could be considered independent contractors. And they said, well, really, they can't, because they're not independent businesses in and of themselves. They're just delivering for FedEx. So here's the test in general. And like I said, it was always a concept of control and this idea of whether they're involved in distinct occupation or business, specialized skills, who's providing supplies and tools. That's traditionally always been part of a contract when it comes to anybody working as a gig or freelancer, that they're providing all of their own tools and supplies. This concept of how they're paid. But the other parts of this are, you know, whether the work is part of the employer's regular business. That's where it gets a little bit dicey when it comes to companies like Uber or Lyft. Their business is technically to provide these rides. Well, so all of their drivers then would be considered their employees, wouldn't they? Well, not necessarily. If you look at other states outside of California, they said that Uber is really just providing the technology for these people to work in the gig economy. And that becomes a question too. So is that platform then providing training? Are they doing their background checks? What level of control over the people that work for them is there? There's a certain level of control you can have when it comes to background checks. But again, these people are all independent. It's not like you're taking a bunch of cab companies and having them and they're doing the dispatching themselves. So it really becomes tricky when it comes to old classification laws and what's new out there as far as technology goes and how they're going to be dealing with that moving forward when it comes to government regulation. The bigger blow was this recent policy shift under Department of Labor guidelines. And that has to do with the economics realities test, which has really become the most strict test out there. And if you can pass the economic realities test, then you're probably golden. So it's this concept of the nature and degree of an employer's control. And it used to be that used to be the main question that you asked. And if you didn't have a level of control that made that person look like an employee, then all the other questions kind of went out the window because you passed the main bright line test. Well, as of last year's guidance, all 6 factors are supposed to be considered equally. And that's where it comes up, this concept of everyone being an employee of someone. Under that scenario, unless you have people that are working as employees of a separate organization and you're subcontracting them through, or if they are legitimately in business for themselves as freelancers, as independent contractors, that may not necessarily mean they're incorporated, but it typically does. Unless that's the case, then they're going to be considered an employee of the company that they're providing services to. And the conclusion was that even if you have zero control over the worker, the Department of Labor still could consider them as classified. They put out this fantastic 15-page document dealing with all of these possible examples of who could be considered an employee. And when it comes to how that can apply to gig workers, again, it's a matter of whether you're bringing them on as something, as a part of something that you are doing that's integral to your business, or whether you're bringing them on truly to perform work as a freelancer without control over what they're doing. So for a construction company that frames residential homes, carpenters are integral to the employer's business because the company is in business to frame homes. Versus they may bring in a software developer to create software that helps them out, and that's not integral to their business, so that's somebody that indicates an independent contractor. Another big thing is whether their managerial skill affects the worker's opportunity for profit or loss. So that means it's actually management of what they're doing that affects their ability to make money, and not just their performance. This is a great example of some of these companies out there that are now using applications for you to bring in people to provide cleaning services. So the question becomes, are they independently scheduling assignments, soliciting work, advertising their services, what have you? It doesn't necessarily mean that they're just providing their own equipment, meaning that they're providing, you know, the supplies that they need to clean a home. It's a matter really of, again, back to the National Labor Relations Board, are they operating as an independent business? And that really, again, becomes the bright line test. I'm not going to read through each of these because I know you're capable of reading. The worker's relative investment compared to the employer's investment. This is another big thing. There's this concept of a contract stating that you're an independent contractor issued a 1099. I think that it's been pretty, everybody in HR is pretty clear on the concept right now that just because you define somebody as an independent contractor doesn't mean that they actually are. But, you know, again, if all of the advertising, everything else, again, this comes up with a company like Uber, that they're providing all of the advertising. They're the ones that are actually enabling all of these people to get work. Really, the person is just providing their car. And under these sorts of guidelines, people working for ride-sharing companies or courier services or any of the rest of the services out there, if they're not providing significant investment in what they're doing, it would indicate them being an employee of the company as opposed to them being an independent contractor working for themselves. The concept of special skills and initiative, again, goes back to the National Labor Relations Board test. The highly skilled contractor that provides carpentry services for a construction firm. Let's take this in a different direction. Let's say a highly skilled software developer that's providing services for a consulting company. However, again, they're not exercised in an independent manner. For example, if you're bringing somebody in to do some additional work as part of a team for one of your clients, they may be a highly skilled person, but that just means that they're a highly skilled person. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're an independent contractor. That's where this comes up quite a bit in IT. In dealing with people that are highly, highly skilled, that are highly paid, that you would think for sure, in particular back in the 90s, these people can be considered independent contractors without a problem. And now because of new regulations and tweaking of laws that were in place previously and how they're actually looked at, these people aren't necessarily going to be considered part of the gig economy of freelancers as easily as they used to be considered freelancers. There's also the concept of the permanence and indefiniteness of the relationship, and kind of got into it a bit with this concept of job hopping and people moving around, but just because somebody job hops a whole lot doesn't necessarily make them an independent contractor either, because they still are probably working as an employee traditionally of a number of different companies. They just happen to move employers a whole lot. But the length of the relationship does have something to do with whether or not somebody would be considered a freelancer or an independent contractor, or whether they would be considered an employee. This example deals with an editor who's worked for a publishing house for a number of years. The permanence of the relationship, the number of years that they're doing it, that's why a lot of companies, when they're bringing on independent contractors, and anybody who's worked in staffing previously has seen this, in particular large companies. AT&T is one of those companies that has caps on the amount of time that people can come in as employees. And these are even people that are working as employees of third-party providers, but they're still limited on the engagement when it comes to working for the clients. Because they're, again, concerned about this concept of them being classified as an employee. And there are specific reasons why they're bringing them in as contractors instead of employees, a number of reasons, which we don't necessarily need to get into. But regardless, they want to make sure that that isn't undermined by the amount of time that somebody is performing work. But, you know, permanence, if somebody is working under contract for somebody for 5 to 10 years as a freelancer, it tends to show this concept of permanence of the relationship, especially if they're not working for anybody else at the same time. Having a client for 10 years that you do work for part-time is very different than exclusively working for that client for 10 years. And then, of course, there's always the nature and degree of the employer's control. And like I said, that was originally the #1 issue, that you could get rid of all of the other issues if you could pass that test. However, again, things like training, it just deals with somebody working for a nurse registry, another industry where people, where nurses were traditionally kind of considered part of that gig economy, were brought on to do work in a number of different hospitals through agencies. There was a number of friends of mine that used to work as traveling nurses, and they were all independent contractors to the agency that they were working for. Well, the reality of it was they were probably misclassified, because the agency is doing these background checks, they're doing training, they're talking about how they should be working or when they can provide work, versus, you know, this example at the bottom where somebody's sending a listing each week with potential clients, and, you know, she can go to whoever she wants and negotiate her own wage and schedule. That's a different degree of control, and that's not indicative of an employment relationship. So basically, when you're a company and you're looking at this concept of whether you should be using freelancers or entering the gig economy and the structure of your organization, probably not the case for a lot of people on this call, but even if you're, you know, about to do a startup and you're thinking about whether you should be organizing that in a way where you're bringing on gig workers and becoming a part of the quote-unquote gig economy, or whether you should be doing that in a traditional employment relationship and bringing on employees. For a lot of companies, in particular those companies that are coming, that are just starting out, it's pretty attractive to bring on people as, you know, as independent contractors, because you don't necessarily have to worry about all of the administrative work that revolves around giving employees benefits, that revolves around the concept of job permanence or unemployment or payroll or any of the rest of the functions that HR performs, in which many people don't realize how many there are. But the question becomes, what are your goals? The level of control you want to have over your workers. And although you see a lot of companies that don't do this correctly, workers that are independent contractors, they shouldn't be using business cards or the email systems of their employers. They shouldn't be regularly assessing performance unless it's done through some sort of platform that allows for the evaluation of all independent contractors as suppliers. That's where the concept of managed service providers and vendor management systems come in. And I'm not going to toot our own horn on this at all, but the idea of documentation and making sure that you have a consistent process that expressly shows that people are independent contractors and working for you is really going to make or break you when it comes to any sort of investigation into whether you should actually be bringing people on as freelancers. The bottom line is that most of the time these investigations arise from some complaint from somebody. So that's another part of it too, is that when you're bringing on people that are experienced as freelancers that understand what it means to be independent for themselves in order to perform services for your company, when those people are defined that way and have self-defined that way for a long period of time prior to coming to work with you. Because realize that that's another key thing, is that people that are going to be working as freelancers for your company, whether you're ready to bring people on as independent contractors, as an employer, these people are working with you. They're not working for you. The concept of training them or taking care of business expenses, stopping them from working for competitors or dictating hours of work in order for them to get things done. That's another giant piece of it. Do you want to pay these people on hourly agreements, or can it be done on a case-by-case basis? Now, granted, there's plenty of agreements out there, and it's a possibility to be able to pay independent contractors and freelancers on an hourly basis and to reimburse certain expenses. But it has to be a company-wide policy. And the other question becomes, is your company capable of organizing that sort of relationship and making sure that there's a clear distinction between what defines an employee and what defines an independent contractor? When you're bringing somebody in to do work on a gig basis and bringing them in as a freelancer, you can't have them working side by side with somebody that is an employee of the organization doing the same thing. But that doesn't just speak to exactly what they're doing. It also just speaks to generally what the relationship looks like, the level of control, the level of training, even when it comes to disciplining those people. A big example that I've used recently with a couple of our clients is to discuss this concept of creating a more intense classification scenario or creating a more intense classification situation prior to onboarding independent contractors. We've talked about this idea of what level of control the managers on site are going to have over these people and what should happen if there is an issue with performance. One of the things dealing with independent contractors as well is that there's no wage and hour stuff dealing with the Department of Labor. You can have clauses that state that if work isn't performed satisfactorily, if you don't meet deliverables, for example, that those people just don't get paid. You can't do that with an employee. If they worked, they get paid. That being said, you talk about this concept of who should be talking to them about their work, whether that work was performed satisfactorily, whether you're saying this is exactly how you want it done, how much supervision you're having. You've got to look at it from a standpoint of, can you treat that person as somebody that you hired on for the specialized skill that they have, knowing that they know what they're doing and you don't necessarily know what they're doing. The best example I can come up with is, say you bring in somebody to unclog a drain or even to install some plumbing at your house. Well, if that person isn't performing satisfactorily, first off, most likely you don't know enough about plumbing to lean over that person and say, oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, or maybe you should do this another way. You wouldn't say that that person is your employee. Thered be no reason for you to say that. And if that person is causing problems, you would probably call the company and not, directly address that person yourself, unless they happen to be somebody that you just sort of pulled off Craigslist. And again, that's another piece of it, is are you prepared to deal with that person as an independent contractor? And or do you want somebody that's more established as an organization that you know that if something goes wrong, there can be some sort of warranty there that they can fix it? So here I'm getting into this concept of once you've made that decision that you are prepared to bring on people as independent contractors, freelancers, gig workers, how do you attract that talent? And in particular in IT, how do you bring those people into work for you as opposed to the myriad of other options that are out there? One of the best ways to look at that is a recent report by Upwork that deals with what the top reasons are for freelancing and why they would want to do that. The flexibility for schedule, being their own boss, working from the location of their choosing, being able to pursue work they're passionate about, the schedule. The concept becomes chasing, being able to provide those things to somebody and advertising those things out to people, making those your selling points, are where you're going to attract the most people that want to work in that sort of environment, clearly. So when it comes to talent attraction of those people, this concept of earning extra money, okay, that's for people that are looking to do this as a side job. And that's where you see it higher on the one thing that's higher for part-time freelancers. But being in control of the ability to schedule themselves or the relationship and what they do with themselves, schedule is huge here. So if you have somebody that you need to bring on that has to work a 9-to-5 job, it's probably not a situation where you should be classifying them as an independent contractor to begin with. But on top of that, you're going to have a real hard time finding freelancers that are going to want to work on that particular schedule. Not only is it the case that a lot of people will do freelance work as a part-time job outside of their full-time job, it's also generally the fact that most people move to freelancing because they want to have this level of control over what they're doing and how they work and when they work. And if you can't provide that sort of a schedule, you're going to have a really hard time attracting top talent in that area. So this just goes into this list of, again, pursuing work that they want to do, working from wherever they want is another thing. Again, the idea that you need somebody to work on site at your location. Okay, for certain situations where they need to be hands-on with some equipment that you have or what have you, of course they're going to need to work on site. But for a lot of work that, you know, so many companies have even moved their employees to working from home. It's another big selling point for people to be able to work remote or work from home, again, to spend more time with friends and family. That's a huge reason why a lot of people are moving towards a freelance mentality, is the ability to schedule themselves, to be around family more often when they want to work around what are now, you know, two-income homes where they want to be able to spend time around each other as opposed to a more traditional relationship many years ago where, you know, one spouse would stay home. And the ability to control what they're doing and decide how it's going to be done and not have somebody breathing down their necks about how they're doing it, especially for more specialized work. So many people have come out of employment situations, in particular with large Fortune 500 companies, where there's just a lot of politics surrounding what they're doing. And once they've reached a certain point in skill level, in particular in IT, and with, you know, there's so many products out there that you're able to test what they're able to do. Once you've found that they're able to do it, they don't want somebody then coming in and saying, oh, well, you know, I know about this, I don't know how you're doing. The ability to have freedom over how they're performing the job and just getting a certain deliverable done is huge. And creating that mentality inside the organization, if you're able to do that, is going to be a big attraction for anybody that's working freelance. The other thing that you can talk about is this idea of what their concerns are. Another big part of this report in whether freelancers were concerned about different areas, the high taxation rates, difficulty in finding more clients or projects, non-payment or late payment by clients. Some of this stuff, Upwork brought this up because they are a platform that allows for freelancers to find more jobs or non-payment and deals with some of the payment issues and what have you. Some of this other stuff when it comes to the cost of healthcare, unpredictable income, savings for retirement, that's just stuff that comes along with being an independent contractor. Those are obviously benefits that you can offer as an employer that you can't offer to freelancers. So you can't necessarily ease those concerns and try to make your place of employment more attractive than others. Now, what you can do, and what there's been a big movement towards, is this concept of having some sort of organizing available for freelancers. So, for example, some of the things that we've done, what you can do is you can have agreements in place with, say, insurance providers, what have you, to where we are able to tell people that are coming on that don't necessarily have their own insurance that, you know, they can feel free to look whoever they want. Here's a referral over to this other organization we've worked with previously that might be able to help them out in taking care of those things. Again, you can't provide too much help to independent contractors in helping them become independent businesses, because that's really going to get you when it comes to this concept of whether they should be classified as independent contractors in the first place. The other part of it, though, is the idea that people can be brought on as sort of part-time employees of a third-party organization that's able to provide them with access to things like healthcare and a 401k, to where they may not necessarily be employees of your organization, but they are part-time employees of another organization that specifically operates that way, that might have the ability to get them into programs like healthcare or insurance or retirement savings, or even take care of some of the issues of taxation that as an organization you can't do, because you have a certain level that you're providing for your employees, and a certain point when all of these things accrue that they're able to sign up for those things, that a staffing organization, for example, might be able to provide those things, or a PEO might be able to provide those things to them, and utilizing that provides you both some protections as an organization from its classification, and also would provide somebody that might typically work as a freelancer the opportunity to work at a staffing company, work for a staffing company as a W-2 employee instead, and ease some of those concerns. So really some of it also depends on how you can structure that relationship. And there are some legal hiccups that you need to get around in doing that, and making sure that you're not providing more liability for yourself in trying to ease the concerns of the freelancers that you're trying to bring on. So this concept becomes, can a client alleviate these concerns without risking being seen as an employer? And I mean, the bottom line is probably not. And a lot of employers out there, it's in particular large employers that have started to realize that. One of the big, if we talk about the app world, Instacart, for example, decided that they were going to start bringing on all of the people that are doing the shopping in stores for them as employees instead of independent contractors, because what they've said is that they wanted to have a certain level of control over the training of those people, and they wanted to be able to provide them with more permanence, as opposed to their delivery drivers, who they are continuing to classify as independent contractors. There's other app companies out there that have made the decision that the people that they bring on are actually going to be employees of the organization overall. That, again, can eliminate some of the freedom that freelancers are looking for, but if you balance that with the concept of some of the concerns that they have as well, and still are able to provide a degree of flexibility, it kind of works in this hybrid fashion. And one of the things that's coming out of that is that there's a lot of employer organizations, in particular when you talk about people involved in unions, for example, that want to, based on the new technology that's out there, want to create this kind of hybrid concept of a dependent contractor, which would allow you to ease concerns and create kind of these networks of freelancers, at the same time making sure that, because you don't have the same level of control, and these people really in the traditional sense are more independent contractors, there is an area to classify them into. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist yet, and right now we're left dealing with what is out there as far as the law goes and how we can classify people. Because of that, a great example of where this is happening now is at Microsoft. They've recently changed their requirements for staffing providers, in that anybody providing resources to work on Microsoft projects now is required to be a W-2 employee of the staffing provider that's bringing them in. And they're required to provide certain benefits to those people that meet these higher standards that Microsoft requires. So a lot of these are just regulations that are there for anybody that's going to be a W-2 employee of somebody, whether it be by federal or state regulations. But the concept of accommodating any disabilities. Having a career development program was huge that a lot of staffing providers don't traditionally provide. And any employer that has over 50 or more employees, this was a big one for a number of our clients, in providing 15 days of paid time off. This deals with not only California regulations that are in place, but a number of other states have started to move towards having mandated paid time off for employees. There's also a move with OFCCP recently that there's going to be potentially a new requirement out there that requires paid time off for anybody that is a federal contractor for their employees, and that's going to trickle down to anybody that is working as a subcontractor of a government contractor as well. And again, providing Affordable Care Act compliant health insurance. That is actually a big one, because they're mandating that for not just anybody that is meeting those requirements as required by the ACA, but anybody in particular, regardless of whether or not they have over 50 employees, that is providing services to Microsoft. Their justification, like I said, is to ensure suppliers share the commitment to minimum employment standards. But the reality there is that they know that they're at risk of becoming common law employees and are embracing the concept of co-employment or joint employment relationship instead. They're taking the responsibility for making sure that anybody that's working with them or providing services as part of one of their teams is going to be provided with a level of benefits and take responsibility for that, so that when it becomes a situation that these people are considered joint employees of Microsoft, that they are adequately employees of the provider, such that Microsoft isn't going to be stuck with the entire bill. So again, it just becomes a matter of potentially restructuring what you're doing internally when it comes to dealing with freelancers or gig workers to make sure that you're getting over all of these hurdles when it comes to misclassification. Admittedly, some of them just aren't, they're not adequate and don't properly address the current technology that's out there, but at the same time, there's additional technology that's out there that allows you to provide a level of documentation and organization that didn't previously exist when this stuff first came into being in the first place. So again, it's sort of the law catching up with the reality as usual, in particular when it comes to technology, and navigating all of that and figuring out whether you're ready to bring on people as gig employees, as freelancers, if you're already doing it, whether you're doing it correctly, and whether you want to change some of your practices or potentially do some reclassification within your company to begin with. And then potentially how you want to organize all of these workers within your organization so that your contingent workforce is all properly classified, properly organized, with only a certain level of control, or in controlling in a way that is in compliance with the legal regulations out there and isn't going to get you in hot water with, you know, the Department of Labor or even potentially the IRS, which is the bigger one that everybody has traditionally worried about. So, as Katrina mentioned in the beginning, we can get to Q&A. We got answers. I just want to leave that with the caveat of kind of. I can't answer any specific questions related to organizations, but generally speaking, we can answer some of those questions. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. Seriously, I learned a lot today. I think, you know, even when we were doing prep for this, I thought I knew so much about the gig economy, and just watching your presentation, I'm like, oh, And we have a few questions that I think it's obvious to me that a lot of people are feeling that way too. So our first question came in from Victoria, and she said, I thought freelancers were self-employed. Can you kind of refine that it was during the like circles slide, breaking down how the distinguishing factors, I guess, were kind of your rules of thumb?
Well, so freelancers can be self-employed, and that's kind of was the stuff that it started to get into. A lot of this has been redefined based on how a lot of large organizations out there have started to require providers to define themselves or what minimum requirements they might require them to meet in order to work as a self-employed individual, versus they could be freelance work that then comes on as a W-2 employee of a third-party organization. They would still technically be considered a freelancer. But, for example, one of the big ones that Upwork was one of the ones that a lot of this was coming out of. They've actually created an enterprise version of their platform recently to where you can find people to work for your organization, provide work, what have you. And then they've also entered into the space of really kind of being a managed service provider to where they actually now have somebody they partner with as a PEO that will bring people on as an employee based on what work you're asking them to do and all sorts of classification questions. And there's different levels of what service they provide, but really it's the same thing that so many managed service providers and vendor management companies have moved towards doing. The people that may have previously been considered self-employed or freelancers, they're really two different things. I mean, just because somebody works as a freelancer, again, you can work as a W-2 employee of a number of different organizations and technically be considered freelance. You can be, it just means that it's really self-employed is a question of if you are paid as a company in and of yourself on a 1099 or whether you're paid on a W-2. So, how you work is kind of more the concept of freelancing. So you can be a freelance journalist and get paid via W-2 from, 3 different papers that pay you, and you'd still kind of be considered a freelancer, but you're still not technically self-employed.
Man, it's understanding all of this. I'm like, yeah. I mean, awesome. Thank you. So we just got a question from Christy about the best way to handle referral fees. If they're not truly an employee, how would you structure that?
As far as
referring someone, I guess, so it's referring someone who, are they an employee? Are they a contractor? How do you kind of build that up on your side?
Oh, insofar as people that are referred over that aren't actually hired as employees?
She said, paying them. Like paying out a referral.
Paying referral fees?
Mm-hmm.
So people that are not employees of your organization that are referring people in?
Correct.
Paying those, okay. Well, I mean, if they're not performing any work for your organization and you're just paying them a referral fee that's a referral fee. Now, if that referral fee is over, I think it's $500 these days, $600 these days, then you technically do have to issue them a 1099 at the end of the year. But generally speaking, you're not dealing with any sort of control or training or anything. I mean, they're really just referring somebody over to you unless they start referring people over to you on a consistent basis and you start, unless it becomes more of a recruiter relationship than a referral relationship, then you're just paying them a fee for a referral.
Got it. And last question, if you're interested in kind of reading more about this, looking for more information, where would you suggest that people go in the deep corners of the internet to find this information?
Oh dear, it's all over. Really, honestly, when it comes to there's a lot of stuff that's out there that's published by a lot of companies that have are very self-interested when it comes to classification and whatnot, that are offering the services themselves. And that's not necessarily not true of attorneys either. But, you know, when I'm looking into the stuff and trying to find the latest and greatest, I'll look at sites that are like Lexology, like legal sites that are out there that aggregate all of the articles published by employment lawyers about this stuff. Because anytime there's a major case that comes up that deals with this stuff, anytime there's a major thing done by any government body or regulation with the Department of Labor or what have you, they're the first ones to jump on it within 24 hours. There's something explaining what happened there and what it means. You know, other than that, you'll find a lot more about like structuring things, but when it comes to things like specific examples, that's where going to sites that have articles that have been written by attorneys or whatnot that kind of call out examples, and the best examples are going to be cases like, you know, happened with the National Labor Relations Board with FedEx, that tells you, if you actually, you know, have the time to sit down and read through the case as opposed to looking at a summary and see the specific examples and how that might compare to your company, that's going to be huge and really help you out with trying to make determinations about classification. When it comes to just generally speaking in whether you're prepared to bring people on as contingent workers or not, again, the providers of these services are out there, but it's really a matter of specific to your situation. If you're really hunting it down, it's not out of the question to potentially bring in somebody, either a service provider that might provide it as part of their service for free, or bring in somebody on a charge when you're really ready to make some decisions. Because the complexity of how this stuff all fits together, you know, like we saw, if we go back to, I mean, how many slides back, this concept of how many different rules and regulations there are out there, and as it's developing every day, my best advice on that is do not try this at home.
Absolutely. All right, well, that's time. Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate it. And anyone who wants to contact Nicole, you can find her on Twitter at NGSESQ, or, I mean, on Facebook or LinkedIn. You'll find her pretty easily. She manages her reputation online. And thank you to our sponsor, HackerRank. For anyone who's still on the line, you can get a copy of the recording and the slides within 48 hours. We'll deliver that straight to your inbox. Thank you so much.